100 years ago, before like the more kind of corporate consumerist approach, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. I'm not saying that's better or worse, but I'm saying there wasn't this war on drugs and this kind of looking down and this um, juvenilization of saying that as humans we can't choose what medicines are going to be good for us, and by demonizing these substances, we kind of give them more charge. Let's let that part of us, which is not the ego striving for survival, let's let that divine unconditional love part of us, let's let that intelligence guide us and groom us and show us where we're going and where we need to be.
Hello, all beautiful people, courageous people right around this beautiful, magical, gorgeous planet. My name is Robert Canis, and this is another Beyond the Courage podcast. Uh, Last week we had a really amazing guest, Julian Palmer, the creator of Changa. We highly recommend this one. It was very deep and beautiful conversation. And today we have another amazing guest from Australia, Rak Razam, who is a world-class expert on psychedelics, mostly 5-MeO DMT, but not only that. And we are super excited to have you as our guest today, Rak. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Robert. I'm really good. I'm still in the game of life, yes. And thank you for that kind introduction. I have been a writer, a commentator, a facilitator, a community kind of organizer in this space for almost 20 years now. And so it can be, as we were saying before we started, it can be a challenge to kind of encapsulate who am I? What am I doing here? But yeah, I do speak on and lecture on. I'm in a few advisory roles for different psychedelic kind of companies as the business of psychedelics becomes more entrenched in the medical model. But in general, I would say that a lot of my life's work and a lot of my writing and understanding is more on an indigenous level of communities that work with shamanic sacraments like ayahuasca and the 5-MeO Bufo toad, and kind of piecing together what these experiences really mean and what the mapping of this inner space of the what's been called the terra incognita, the invisible landscape, what this really means to us beyond the medical model of psychedelics and more into this global shamanic resurgence, as I like to phrase it. So thank you for having me.
Yes, we are super excited. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Um, I would like to ask you, what is the view? What is your view of life? Like, what is going on here? Well, Terence McKenna was talking a lot about it. What is going on? What what it means to be conscious, to
Gee,
be
what a
human?
great opening question, Robert. I think that'll do us for the show. Let's just unpack this a little bit. What the freak is this that we're in? Um, you know, as you go, as you or as I have entered what we could call the spiritual path, and it's been termed many things, the pathless path. It's kind of like the self-intelligent universe which we're part of and not separate from, and yet we have this illusion of separateness. It is titrating us, and it is grooming us, and it is preparing us for more of it somehow. I mean, all I can say is, we'll unpack this more, but the journey itself is relentless and ongoing, and our ability to figure out what we're in is kind of the point of being here, I think, right? There's a point to this. There's a point to life. There's lots of different ways to slice this, but sometimes people say, look, there's no point. It's just the ego striving that we're always looking to do something. We're always looking to be in this active engagement to give us purpose and meaning. And there's actually no point but to actually be here now and to be part of it all. And that's kind of true as well. And to kind of deconstruct and disassemble what this is that we're in and what we are, is a whole nother kind of layer of reality and of understanding. And so, we could stay on the surface level of the world, and we could enjoy the dawn and the sun as it rises and the earth, and we could go to work and find meaning in our lives, and we can give love and receive love. And that's kind of pretty much what it's all about. But it's a question of, what are we in? What is it that we're in where we can experience this experience of being human? I like to say that these bodies we have, these vessels, are like holidays from eternity, because a lot of my work with especially 5-MeO,
I love the
kind of
name.
reveals that we're not just our bodies, and we're not just the robot body, and we're not what we think we are. It's like an iceberg with 9/10 of the surface under the egoic mind. There's more to us. But these levels of initiation, of understanding what we are part of this spiritual path. And it kind of staggers itself and it reveals itself according to what you're ready for. And sometimes I guess there's more of an urgency. And it seems like these are the times we're in now, where the times themselves and the world itself is going through a lot of upheaval, a lot of change. And it's asking us to dig quite deeply into going, well, who are we? What do we stand for? What do we want our lives to be? What are we giving back? And this is kind of this is like a global initiation. So I might just throw it back to you. It's a big question. I think we can go a few levels deep into this, but essentially I'd say that we're in something which is intelligent, alive, and grooming us. It's like we have a very small microcosm understanding, and we're in this incredibly infinite school of life. And that's what many people say. It's a school that we're here to learn, we're here to grow. All of these concepts imply that there is a goal, or there is some fruition point, there is a purpose beyond just the kind of animalistic existing and exchanging of energies with people. I guess my shorthand and one of my favorite quotes comes from a 19th century, early 20th century philosopher called Henry Bergson, who has this paraphrasing this quote that says, "The universe is a machine for making gods." And I think that's very
Oh,
close to the
wow.
mark.
That's an amazing quote. I love that.
Mm.
Well, I totally agree with you that life is amazing, life is magical. I got a lot of experience with plant medicine myself, and one of the first messages I got from the plants were that life is not logical and it's not rational. We are trying to make it logical and rational, uh, and it's absolutely unpredictable, and we have this mystery of life, which is, I think, also a very good idea that we do not know the rules of this amazing, beautiful game. And as I have mentioned before we started recording the podcast, Beyond the Courage is the creation about celebrating life, also about celebrating our guests and our viewers and listeners. Today, we would like to celebrate you. And the question is, how would you like to be celebrated? Or maybe I can rephrase this question: how the humanity can be celebrated nowadays?
Gosh, you're hitting on my trigger points, Robert, very early in my morning. I mean, this means I need to be able to receive your celebration. And I'm like, wow, can I receive your celebration? Yeah, I guess I can. I mean, part of me kind of instinctually wants to deflect that attention and go like, not that I'm not worthy. I'm just kind of like, well, we're all worthy. And I guess this is kind of what I do. I displace a lot into the collective and going, okay, talk about me, but let's talk about us. So I'm going to
Yeah.
receive your celebration of me. And how would I like to be received? I don't know, Robert. You celebrate me as you wish.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Referring to 5-MeO DMT, a lot of your work, you spent many years being a facilitator and also spreading the information about it. I really admire your work. Would you agree that 5-MeO DMT buffalo virus is the most advanced technology which Godhead is using to implement it within human body to live this godness within this vehicle, also with this extremely challenging factor, which is ego?
Yeah, good point. I was going to bring that back to it. So 5-MeO is a beautiful substance, and we need to unpack and define a few things before we begin. So often the man-made psychedelics are considered drugs, right? They're considered chemicals that are exterior to us. We take them, we change our consciousness. We may have very profound realizations. But essentially what we're doing, we're modulating the baseline consciousness that we have now. And like goldfish that are in a bowl of water, we often don't recognize what we're in. We're in this consciousness, we're in our beings and our bodies, and sometimes on these experiences and these substances, we expand our consciousness or we amplify consciousness, and we seem to kind of go beyond baseline into higher dimensionality, or we're receiving more signal, broadcast signal. So to talk about any of this, we kind of have to come back to the base frameworks and the definitions of what all this is. So what is consciousness, right? So they still don't
Right.
know, right? We still
Yeah.
don't know. The
Mm.
science will,
We
and
have no
the
idea.
current times we're in, there's so much argument about everything and polarity. But the original polarity of consciousness comes down to basically two options. Is it consciousness? Is it created and gestated in the human being, in our brains? Is it something that needs this base station of the body and the physicality? And is it just in here? And if it is just in here, am I separate then from the consciousness of all other people? And can I even ascertain if other people really are conscious, or if it's just me, or what is consciousness? So that theory for me of consciousness being, part of the physical organism, and it dies with the physical organism, is it doesn't ring true to me, and it doesn't ring true. And there's been a lot of debunking of that, and kind of looking at that all the way back to 1900s, when there were some famous, medical kind of accidents where one railway worker was putting in these big iron kind of nails into the rail, and one went up and severed his corpus callosum and the brain stem. And basically what they discovered is the brain can reroute. And they've had recent examples where people have, through disease or infection or different things, one guy had like the brain, functional brain the size of a pea, but he had all his higher faculties, and all of the usual geography bits of the
Wow.
brain which have functionality were kind of rerouting, and it's holographic. It finds a way to continue to work with, whatever it's got. And it doesn't appear to be trapped in the physicality itself. So the other, theory of consciousness is that basically it's a broadcast signal, and that signal is picked up by the receiver of the base station of the human being, or the animal, or the plant, or in fact everything. Everything has a consciousness, and this gets closer to indigenous beliefs, and a lot of the kind of entheogenic beliefs of, the indigenous peoples who work with plant medicines like ayahuasca. They all believe like the world's like an animist thing, that everything has a spirit, everything has consciousness, everything has a level of engagement, of awareness. But what many beings don't have is perhaps egoic awareness. So I ascribe to the precept that consciousness is a broadcast signal that we're receiving, and when the brain goes offline or isn't receiving, consciousness is still being broadcast, right? And
Hmm.
there's been many examples in the medical kind of history books of this. What they say is, like, when the radio or the TV set is, destroyed, damaged, switched off, the signal is still being broadcast. And that's what I think is happening with consciousness in general. But now we get to this next level of definition of understanding, and it's like, well, what is the ego? Okay. And we can define this, in the original translation, the ego essentially just means the I, right, in the Latin. And it just
Hmm.
means the sense of I, or the identity. So we know that when babies are born, for instance, human babies, their brains are flooded with these chemicals called tryptamines. So tryptamines include 5-MeO, or 5-methoxy-NN dimethyltryptamine. It also includes NN dimethyltryptamine, or normal DMT. It also includes pinealine, melanin or melatonin in skin pigment, bufotenine. We have an enormous amount of tryptamines all through nature, in the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, in human beings as well. And so these things are put in us as neurochemical catalysts. Some of them are very close to neurotransmitters. They work on the serotonin system, basic fundamental kind of chemicals that are in not just the human organism, but all through nature. And the tryptamines seem to be systemically involved with consciousness. So not only do we not know what consciousness is, we also don't really know what reality is, and we don't know what made us, or how through the blind, evolutionary kind of chance, that we have such an intricate operating system that has all these feedback loops and works so incredibly effectively to keep us alive as human beings. But what we can say pretty conclusively is that we have an ego, we have a sense of I, but we don't always have it. And to come back to the babies, it takes a few months, it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months. When babies are born, their brains are flooded with tryptamines, and tryptamines can engender states of unity, especially 5-MeO. What the modern neuroscience has shown with some EEG readings of what's happening in the brain on 5-MeO DMT is essentially when we take it from an external source and it's smoked and inhaled, as most of the tryptamines need to be. It goes from the lungs to the blood-brain barrier. All the other trace elements burn off, and the 5-MeO goes into the brain. It's like a key goes in a lock and it opens a door. What the EEG brainwave readings have shown is that 5-MeO DMT reduces the electrical activity in the frontal and parietal lobes of the brain, the same geographic region where they believe the sense of I or the ego is generated. So just like babies before they have the I and their brains are flooded with tryptamines, which are both neuroprotective and also kind of lowering the ego, as they lower the ego, we kind of experientially feel and understand and reconnect to a wider bandwidth of information, of potential, right? And so babies are born like that, and their brains are flow with tryptamines. But over time, the babies come into this separation from the unity field all around, and they come into this sense of I or the ego. Now, we need the ego. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't like terms like ego death, for instance, which are very almost patriarchal. They're very yang. It's very violent. Ego death, right? It's not true. I mean, I have crossed over many times with the assistance of medicines and experientially felt the ego lowering. And my favorite quote's from the poet Rumi, the Persian poet. And he says, "You are not the drop. You are the ocean in the drop." Right? And so with
Ocean
something like
Ledger.
5-MeO or the ego dissolvers, the ego mind is invited, or the ego is invited to open and to open and to let go. And when it lets go, the individual drop becomes oceanic and rejoins that unity field. What 5-MeO has revealed for me is that there's a mechanism of action within us which lowers the ego and connects us to what I'm kind of calling the we-go, or the collective, or the feeling of this unity all around. Now, every culture, all the indigenous cultures and a lot of the old Vedic cultures of India and Persia and all through kind of the old Middle East that had an entheogen, had a sacred substance which connected them to the divine within. They kind of use these things to format and to understand and to remember the potential of their operating system. So I like to say the ego is like a program that's running on your operating system. It's like an app, right? But it's not the operating system. You're the operating system. A lot of the thrust of meditation and breath work and the Vedic path or the yogic path is to regulate the body and the mind and the soul, and to be able to direct your attention and your consciousness inwards to kind of lower the ego. And those whole cultures train people to go within and to discover who and what they really are. In our culture, who and what we really are has become a commodified product of capitalism, and it's been really commodified, and so we're not encouraged to explore this. So we have a broadcast consciousness, we have a base station receiver of our individual beings, which don't need an ego all the time or a lowered ego to be functioning. And as I said, part of the Vedic path, I used to run these retreats in Mexico a few years back, just a few years ago, and Tandava retreats in Joel Bier in Victoria. Still run them. I used to call them bridgingheaven.com. The website's still up. But they were low dose 5-MeO in a Vipassana style meditation container to invite and encourage people to go within with a little bit of a kick to go deeper, to realize that there's this geography within us. And this geography is accessible, whether you do that with breath work or meditation or psychedelics, right? And different psychedelics are like different tools. I like to say it's like an operating theater with a surgery. Is like the doctor might say, "Nurse, I need scalpel or sponge or suction or suture." Ayahuasca does something very well. You have more egoic presence on ayahuasca. You engage with your subconscious and you can sort through emotional traumas. 5-MeO does one thing very well. It lowers the egoic mind and it reveals the divine behind the egoic mind. All the different medicines have different roles and different capabilities. So the broadcast consciousness, the ego's there, but this is exactly it. It's all about the ego. And so my shorthand over many years of doing this journey work and getting my own downloads and understandings of what reality is and who and what we are, I got this download that essentially the ego, which, we're evolving beings and we've not always been not just in this physical genetic kind of format, we've been evolving our physicality, but so has our mentality been evolving and our spirituality. And so here in Australia, the Australian Aborigines say that there's a thing called dreamtime consciousness. And if we dig into that, it kind of means that there's a state of consciousness where we feel that connection to the web of life and to all things. And we've not been in this rigid kind of hierarchical consciousness where we're trapped, in this state of the ego mind. And they say that it's cyclic and it's coming back. And many understandings of different cultures of the world understand that things are cyclic. And I believe consciousness is kind of cyclic. And we're kind of at this phase now where we're being invited and bombarded with different energies. And it's an opportunity to drop the egoic mind and to remember who and what we really are.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that great answer. It's very resonating with my heart. And Rak, who do you think or what is broadcasting that signal of consciousness?
Well, I'll tell you now, whatever word I give the thing which is broadcasting that signal is going to piss someone off, right? Because we're in this age of polarity and of triggers. And so, I don't know, we could call it the implicate. That's what David Bohm, the famous quantum physicist, called it. And he said, from the implicate, the explicate is created as a projection or emanation from that space. The first time I did 5-MeO, which you can see actually in my documentary, Ire Awakenings, you can go to my website, rakrazam.com, or look up Ire Awakenings. It's on Vimeo and a lot of other platforms. It was filmed on the outside. And the thing is, you don't really get anything on the outside from what's happening on the inside. But my experience was going into the classic mystical kind of white light and this feeling of infinite expansion and presence and intelligence. And so I was just a witness in consciousness going in and in for 9 minutes into this white light tunnel kind of ecosystem ecology. And there was something happening there. And so in terms of what is broadcasting this signal, you've got to understand this is tricky. And the language that we need to utilize, language is kind of all we have to communicate it, but it's never going to be enough. I mean, inside every human being, there is this raging, sacred, infinite space, which is behind the ego mind. And so many cultures say this. The kingdom lies within, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness. But these words are just labels, right? So as I went in the first time on my experience of 5-MeO into like the white light, it's like there was a tunnel. And it was like the tunnel was like a cavern, but infinite. And it was like white light with very subtle shades of very light blue and gold. And they were rotating around the tunnel. And as I was going into it, it was kind of coming out to meet me, or there was a wave of energy in this kind of invisible infinite space. And I was just a witness in consciousness. But my witness in consciousness was open and receiving every nuance of everything. And essentially, as this wave hit me, it kind of hit my vibrational wavefront on my beingness. And there was no body, I was disembodied, but it opened me, and all my memories and everything I'd been stored and charging came out of me and started to kind of circulate around the circumference of this white light tunnel, classic mystical experience. And so what I would say, I have a friend in the States, I'll say a shout out to Hal Lucius of the Temple of Awakening Divinity, who's been working with 5-MeO in a legal church for over 15, almost 20 years now. He says that, this word that we're skirting around, whether we call it the implicate, whether we call it the 0 point, whether we call it the quantum field, whether we call it Great Spirit, Mitakuye-Oyasin, whether we call it God, whether we call it whatever, right? It exists. And we can prove this to you. You might not have the language to call it what we would call it, but you will experience this something. It might be this infinite energy, this 0 point field. But within that, there is an intelligence. And that space is, for me, it's like a vibrational frequency of being that isn't in the physical. It's that we're on the baseline reality now. Everything's vibration. This is what science says, right? Everything's vibration. And we have this illusion of solidity of the baseline material world because everything's vibrating at a very low rate, which means it looks solid. We have the illusion of solidity. But essentially, everything's vibration. And if you continue to raise your vibration, whether through breath work, meditation, or psychedelics, or whatever, if you're raising your vibration, you're attuning to different vibrational frequencies. And so on 5-MeO, as it drops the ego mind and you open to the infinite, you're just kind of drinking in the 0 1 0 1 0 1, like the core frequency of God, right? And you're attuning to it, you're pattern matching it. And then this realization came to me that, oh my God, it's like I am it. Like whatever I'm in with the intelligence that it had, that was reading me and my memories were going around and going back into it, it actually was revealing that I was it. And all of this is kind of intuitive, telepathic. It's beyond the normal framework of our normal everyday conversations, right? This is kind of spiritual, it's kind of quantum. But what I'm saying is we're actually in a new paradigm now on planet Earth. We're in these times, these end times and new beginning times where we have enough wisdom and enough science and enough understanding where, at least since the 60s and 70s, it seems to be this merging and parallel. Remember the Tao of physics in the 70s and all these kind of attempts it's all about the language, whether we say the implicate and we understand the quantum field, or we describe it as, an emanation of the divine, or the language is going to alienate someone. But what we're trying to say is there's a commonality. And with 5-MeO, particularly as a replicable technology of the sacred, we can prove this to you. You can experience this again and again and again, which is another issue, but you can experience it in a way which makes sense that, oh my God, this is happening. What does it mean? What do I take from this? How do I understand it? It's another thing. So anyway, my friend Hal Lucius of the Temple of Awakened Divinity called this space not a geography, but a theography, a divine space. And that space is an infinite vibrational frequency that is so high in vibration that you may see it as white light, right? But the white light, some people hear it. Basically, when we have our 5 or more senses and they're going out into the world and we're navigating with the ego, this simulation of what reality is. But when we direct those senses inwards, it's to connect to the divine. And some people are visually dominant. They may see white light. Some people hear the divine tinkling of the vibrational kind of field. Majority of people on the 5-MeO experience feel this infinite space and this heart activation space. I mean, it's all there, like in the Bible when they say God is love, right? I mean, it's not just a hallmark greeting card or a bumper sticker slogan. What I take that to mean is the vibration of love, which is the most powerful thing in the universe. And if you felt it, you will know. It's like that vibration is like if we feel it in our little human bodies, and it's like, okay, oh my God, I love that poppy dog. It's a little love. It's like a little flame. It's like a spark. But if you let that spark widen and open, you get this raging vibrational frequency of unconditional love, which is like being in the heart of the sun. It's so intense. It's so enormous. It's a dimension of being which is eternal because it's just the infinite vibration of unconditional love. And that's what I believe the divine is. And when we lower the gate of our separation, however you want to do that, it reveals this oceanic divine love that is the intelligent creation and being of all things. But the thing is, it exists permanently, eternally, perfectly radiating in superunion, being the white light, the shining, infinite, unconditional love. And it can't not do that, or it wouldn't be what it is. But miracle of miracles, what I felt was, as it was reading me, it was kind of like all my memories, all my information. As what I realized later as my first 5-MeO experience, when we're born, we come down empty. And these base stations to receive the broadcast signal, right? And as we go through life, we accrue life experience. And it's kind of vibrational because we understand a lot with psychedelics and with trauma and with what is being used for in the medical model. As human beings go through life, they have good things and bad things happen. I'm not quite sure where the good stuff goes, but the bad stuff often it lodges in us and it sticks and we take on board and then it all holds in our energetic bodies, our emotional bodies, our luminous light bodies, and it's held in by the ego mind like a cork in a bottle. And over time, these traumas and these stresses and these things, these emotions can turn in the physical body as glitches and inflammation and sickness, or they can cause mental glitches in the being. But essentially, as we let go, we can clean out all those energies we've been holding on to, and that's what psychedelics can do by lowering the ego mind. But essentially, what I realized in my 5-MeO first experience, all of this stuff I've been holding on to, not just the bad stuff, like all the recordings, like everything I've ever experienced, was being transmitted back into that frequency when I was there. And it felt like a death experience. I mean, I haven't obviously physically died, but I have crossed over many, many times on 5-MeO, and the ego has dropped. And the entrainment of lowering the ego and coming back and lowering the ego and coming back over many, many years shifts your vibrational structure. And so I think what I'm aiming for, and what I think that the psychedelic kind of work does in general, at the moment, the psychedelic industry, and it's very much, being positioned to come back into the medical model and to kind of get rid of antidepressants and to work on traumas and to, in a way, placate and sedate the average person to go back to work in a society, in a world which is kind of, you know, rapidly going downhill. But in general, it's really involved about trauma and lowering the ego mind enough to relieve the trauma. But that's just the first step. Because what happened to me was I realized, oh, all my imprints, my memories, my experiences were going back into that vibrational frequency. And you know what they say? Information has mass. Information and isn't lost or destroyed. It's somewhere out there in the Akashic or the holographic field or whatever. So the short and curlies of this is my first 5-MeO experience. What I took from that was many things, but one of them was realizing that that vibrational frequency of God remains eternal and pure in its unconditional radiatingness. But also, I was feeding it. It was feeding from me. It was like a laser on a CD reading information. And what I understood from that is the vibration of the divine is so vibrationally pure, but it doesn't stop. It condenses down and it radiates down, and it becomes creation. It becomes the matter world. It becomes this space-time kind of game that we're in, and it makes it from its own vibrational essence. And all matter is made from slowing down the intense vibration of the divine into lower vibrational waveforms. And so to come back full circle to your original question, there's an incredible intelligence in that. There's a divine intelligence in that. The divine is outside space and time, and all of space time is like it's like an audio wave file. It's got peaks and troughs, and it's got a beginning and an end, but it's contained, and it's contained within space time. But space time is like a petri dish that is being fed by the divine and infused into it. And why? What is it doing? Well, remember Henry Bergson, the universe is a machine for making gods. So when we come down, we're empty, and we go through and we have these experiences navigating with our ego. And when we go back, we're full, right? Because when I went back, it was reading me, and it was like, oh yeah, it's all this. And I was like, wow, somehow it's found a way to remain eternal in that frequency, come trickle down here in the petri dish. And as Henry Bergson says, it's a machine for our awakening, for us to realize that we're that thing, and to kind of grow more God stuff inside the creation. That's what I really believe is happening, and that's what I believe the intelligence is, which would then mean that what we're in is a school or a container, this petri dish idea. It's a container or a crucible or an opportunity to learn and to grow and to love. That's what I think this world is.
Wow, those are beautiful words. Um, have you noticed those psychedelics, secret plants? Do they have a sense of humor? Do you recall any like really funny situation or some information, some kind of message?
Gosh, I mean,
which make you really laugh and which was really entertaining.
I'm not going to have a really pat answer for that. I mean, essentially, in general, what that proposes is, do plants or plant medicines, um, do they have this human quality of humor, right? Do they have
Hmm.
that egoic function that we do? I don't think so. I don't know. Although, I've done a few dietas in my ayahuasca years with Aho Sacha, one of the garlic in the garlic family, and there's been other. I know many people that have done dietas with different trees and woods and plants, and yeah, they definitely say they have personalities in a sense. But I would question how much of it is the plant intelligence interfacing with our egos and kind of making a personality or ascribing a personality to the plant intelligence. But in general, yeah, like I mean, ayahuasca, for instance, definitely has kind of an intelligence and maybe an agenda. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of current science looking at plant intelligence, and again, what that would mean, because we have a bias. We have a bias with human
Hmm.
egoic uh, centricity of going, well, we know how we work, and we're the only way it could work. So how could a plant be conscious? There's another fellow Australian scientist called Monica Gagliano, who wrote a New York Times best-selling book called "Thus Spoke the Plant," and she was I think a biologist, and she was looking at plant experiments and looking at ways they would respond to triggers and ways that they would learn from behaviors. And there's a whole lot of evidence saying that, yeah, plants are definitely conscious, and they have obviously not a brain. They don't have a brain. It's not centralized in the way that we work. And again, this would point more to that broadcast signal that plants are plugged into, a broadcast signal of consciousness that's all around them and exchanging not just physical matter and biology and water and sugars and things like that, but information as well. And there's so much in the Amazonian tradition of working with plant medicines that treats plants as family. Their language for this is familial in the sense they won't talk about neurochemical structures. They'll talk about how mapacho, one of the Nicotina rustica tobaccos in Peru, which is used in ayahuasca ceremonies, is like the mother of ayahuasca. But what they mean by that is that the relationships that tobacco has with ayahuasca is they synergize each other. They help support each other in ceremony, and the mapacho can help clear the visions or work with the ayahuasca. But there's so much about plant intelligence and how that responds to humans, and then also about how much plant intelligence and animalistic intelligence and even the mineral intelligence of the earth. In many cultures in Peru, they believe that the whole earth and the mountains, the apus, have spirits in them, and that everything has kind of its own level of consciousness, but collectively it's all synergistically working together to do something greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that's what we need to look at, not just, okay, we're intelligent, we're this species which has kind of conquered most of the world and other species. And, we're going through the sixth great species extinction at the moment, largely to, climate change and human behavior and what we've done on the earth. But it's a collective intelligence that's here on this planet. And we're still coming around to recognizing that, I think.
Yep. Thank you. Rak, do you have some experiences and some views of on this amazing plant called Iboga, which is
I do actually. And have
widely.
asked me 2 months ago,
Hmm.
I wouldn't have. I was lined up to
Hmm.
do a documentary in Iboga about 2 or 3 years back with
Hmm.
an American producer, and it kind of fell through. But I'd done a lot of research in Iboga, and I know a lot of facilitator friends who do work with Iboga. For the audience here, Iboga is a plant medicine. It's a woody shrub which grows in Africa, in Gabon. It's originally been shepherded out into the world by the pygmy people, who, same with Peru. A lot of these people say, well, how did they get the origin of using this medicine? But they always kind of say the plant told them to, or there was an intelligence in it, or some transmission that instructed them of how to use this. But Iboga is a very powerful psychedelic. It's also a tryptamine in the tryptamine family. And it is a experience which creates a visionary experience which can last for up to 2 or 3 days. So I actually did Iboga recently a few months ago.
Hmm.
What can I say about Iboga? It's a very beautiful plant and medicine. There are risks with it. You've got to be careful, make sure your heart is checked. It can put extra strain on the heart. Um, it's it's a visionary experience, like working with the toad and 5-MeO. What 5-MeO does is lower the gate of the egoic mind, and as it lowers it, it reveals the divine within. With
Hmm.
NN-DMT, which is a tryptamine just like Iboga, and with Iboga and with ayahuasca and a lot of the other psychedelic kind of plant medicines, the ego is usually present in some capacity. And that's what I found with Iboga is that the ego was present, which means you can engage with your subconscious. It lowers the gate of the ego mind in a way, usually in not thinking the normal 9 to 5 shopping list type of stuff, but you're connected to yourself, to your subconscious, and through that to the medicine and the spirit of Iboga and what it connects to. And it has a very deep lineage in the African tradition. And it can be, I felt that the difference between ayahuasca and Iboga, ayahuasca can be very visionary as well. And ayahuasca usually contains NN-dimethyltryptamine or normal DMT, which can be a very potent, almost virtual reality, very crisp, sharp, clean, visionary experience with ayahuasca. It can be like patterns, geometries, tryptamine kind of geometries. It can be architectures, aliens, ancestors, all of these kind of levels of engagement with beings as well as kind of just visions. Iboga, I found that it was kind of different, that it was accessing my memory and it was accessing like if I was think of a lion, it would access my memory banks of where did I see a lion, what children's TV show, what's my memory of lion. It would build up these archetypes for the visions based on not generating them autonomously, but it's actually accessing memory. So iboga and the root chemical ibogaine has been used since the 1960s as an addiction disruptor, and it's very powerful to treat addictions, including heroin and some big darker drugs like that. And it does flush out and clean out these areas of the brain which are involved in the patterning of why we're addicted, not the emotional root reason. That's what's going to show you, but the physicality of where it's happening, why it's happening. So I felt like that was connected to Iboga's visioning potential. I have this very, very strong ego mind, and I can't help it. But it didn't
Yeah.
kind of lower enough to get full visions from ayahuasca. I was like, for 12 hours in the dark with an eye mask on, I could see the contours of the room and I could see through the shutters a little bit of light coming through, and I could see people moving around the room very clearly, like the whole shape of a person as like a black silhouette against darkness with the eye mask on. Like I'm seeing in the dark, literally for 12 hours. And I would
Wow,
open up the eye
that's
mask
amazing.
and the room would be exactly the same contours, but it wouldn't have exactly what I was seeing. It was like I was seeing some other higher dimensional thing, and it was all very muted. But it was crazy, crazy. But and then there would be this drift, like the old Atari games, like the 8-bit graphics or 16-bit,
Yeah.
graphics, like the pixelation where things are blocky, and it was like, and there was this drift, almost like the old Atari game of asteroids, where they go left to right, and so the spirits would come by and they'd kind of drift,
Hmm.
and it was almost as if I could see, like on one stage, I could see like the the um the wallpaper from my grandmother's house where I grew up, and it would kind of be in dark shadow, but it would be patterned on the wall. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's choosing this bit of my memory and it's putting this on the wall. But what does that represent? Oh, it represents my grandma's house where I'm safe and I grew up. And so it's almost as if Iboga and the intelligence in Iboga was creating a container and an environment where I felt safe. And it was doing that visually and energetically. And then within that, it was creating an opportunity to go deeper. So Iboga lasts for a very long time. You kind of can't move a lot. It does something really pronounced to the vertigo centers, where if you move, it can feel very, very sick. So you have to be very still, and the ego's present. And you can ask questions. Like my facilitator, who was exceptionally good, she got us to write out like all these 20 questions. And then as you go through it, my partner who did Iboga with me had the full experience because I wasn't getting the visions fully. But she was seeing the visions fully and asking her questions, and the questions were like coming to life. And there's a kind of collapse of resistance, of disbelief, where it's like when you know, it's overriding the ego again. Somehow it's getting past the ego, even though the ego is present. When you're engaging and you're manifesting and visualizing your exact questions and what you want to know and how you want to engage, it's like you're getting resolution, or you're getting this real deep kind of satisfaction of this contact experience with Iboga. And so for a lot of people, it can get to the root of the emotional reasons where they may be facing challenges in their life. And that's why it works so well with addictions. Not just that it's cleaning out the addiction centers physically, because I think it's doing that, but it's actually
Mm-hmm.
helping your subconscious come to grips with the traumas and the things which happen to you, in seeing it in a different way, understanding the context, and diffusing the charge that you may be holding around those historical incidents, so that they're not energetically present in you in the same way. So it's incredibly powerful medicine, incredibly transformative. And I do look forward to going to Gabon sometime in the future and experiencing that in an indigenous setting.
Yeah. Do, 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 do you remember the dosage you took? Uh,
I took 20 grams. Yeah,
20 grams.
I think it's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot. I can't remember that. I remember we started off on a normal dose, and that wasn't working, and then we went up to a really high dose. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was the dose, but I could be
Yeah.
getting that completely wrong.
20 grams is a lot. Do you have some experience with microdosing Iboga by chance?
Well, funnily you mentioned that, Julian Palmer, who you mentioned the other day, probably 5 years ago, gave me some Iboga micro. He has a company that legally sells them, and I did do
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of microdosing, but nothing that pronounced. But I have a deep respect for Iboga. It's a new medicine for me, and with each medicine that you work with, there's a relationship. And so I've worked predominantly with ayahuasca for 7 years, toad for 7 years now, the 5-MeO, and currently currently I am starting work with Iboga, and it's a relationship. So yeah.
Would you find it very difficult for you, extremely difficult, or?
Oh yeah, it's very difficult,
Mm,
Iboga. It's an ordeal medicine. It's a challenge. It's a challenge mainly
mm,
because of the physicality. I mean, there is some purging and sickness. You can't move. And they say that like 5-MeO is going to the light, and Iboga is going to the darkness. It's going to the underworld. Some people might call that
mm-hmm,
hell, but that's a more of a Christian, Judeo-Christianic thing. I mean, it's a root shrub, right? It's down into the earth with the roots of Iboga. It's very earthy, and when they say it goes to the underworld, it kind of means that you can meet your ancestors, you can connect to them and your whole lineage. And I find I don't think there's anything to be scared of at all, but it's a very different experience, and it really means going into the shadow and into the underworld and going down into there and like bringing stuff up to the light that you need to. But yeah, I have a lot of respect for Iboga. I'm maybe doing it again very soon.
yeah, it's calling me also very heavy. That's why I'm asking. Yeah, the
I
spirit
think as well,
of
Iboga
this.
is almost the last
Mm,
major shamanic sacrament we know of in the modern world
mm,
that hasn't been explored, or you could say exploited. I mean, what happens with all of the medicines going all the way back to tobacco, which was the most sacred master plant? And in Peru, they work with mapacho, Nicotina rustica, which is about 19% nicotine. And they use it to pray, and they use it to sople and to cleanse and to take energy off and to clean out and seal down, and it's a very powerful tool. But they have a relationship with the tobacco, and so what happened with the old world and the new world when the church essentially went back 500 years ago, it went back to pillage and conquer, and when they found cultures that were working with plant medicines, they saw them as the work of the devil because they had that lens of the Christian kind of thing on them. But not only that, they took the plants, even like tobacco, that isn't psychedelic, it is psychoactive, and they commodified it. They kind of bastardized it. They took it out of the right relationship where it was used like Native Americans with the peace pipe, going around and to calm. And they wouldn't actually talk before everyone had had the peace pipe, and kind of gets into this regulated sense where they're not in the ego. They're coming from the heart. And so tobacco was commodified and then pumped out, and now in the modern world it's full of hundreds of deadly chemicals which cause cancer, but tobacco doesn't cause cancer on its own. This will probably get flagged by YouTube for saying that now. But you
Mm.
know, it's like many people. It's the additives. I mean, to reiterate, tobacco is a sacred plant, and ayahuasca is a sacred plant, and Iboga is a sacred plant, and all of them are sacred. But what we're seeing in the business of psychedelics, as these medicines scale to the need for the sick Westerners, is that there's a supply and demand which we can't fulfill. And we're all kind of to blame for this because we promote these experiences. And, you know, I need to say psychedelics or plant medicines and earth medicines are not for everyone. And they're not for everyone because some people may react really badly to these if they have any mental imbalances or sensitivities or weaknesses there or underlying issues. But in general, these substances used in the right set and setting in a healthy and kind of mature way can be transformative and can be rebirthing and can show you who you really are and can help you face your darkness and let it go. And so Iboga can do that as well as ayahuasca, as well as all these plants. But I think the danger is they can't scale. There's issues around ayahuasca sustainability as tens of millions of more people come on board. The famous quote, you know, is like Lindsay Lohan, the Hollywood actress, almost a generation ago now. She tweeted, you know, to 6 million of her followers about ayahuasca. If 1% of them go and look for ayahuasca, it's going to overthrow the apple cart there. You know, magic mushrooms, as psilocybin, are on the rise again now. Introduced to the
Yeah.
West in the 1950s by Maria Sabina through Gordon Wassoon, the investment banker. But you know, they could scale potentially mushrooms. They grow very quickly. And then we have the argument to do these things in the lab to make chemical extractions like ibogaine from iboga or psilocin or the, you know, synthetic psilocybin from the mushrooms or 5-MeO, which they're, you know, bringing in for utilizing in therapy work in the States. And they want to put a patent on all these things and maybe change one molecule and then own it and, you know, and put it into these environments. We're in a really kind of challenging space where these experiences can help people, but it's not just about the chemicals. It's not just about, they're not drugs. The difference between a drug and a medicine is intention. And in the West, we've taken things and made them just drugs, where, you know, 100 years ago, before like the more kind of corporate consumerist approach, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. I'm not saying that's better or worse, but I'm saying there wasn't this war on drugs and this kind of looking down and this um, juvenilization of saying that as humans we can't choose what medicines are going to be good for us. And you know, by demonizing these substances, we kind of give them more charge, and we give them this context which creates this murkiness. But it's not just the medicine or the substance. The medicine comes with the intention, and too much of a medicine is a poison, right? But it's like of anything. But these substances can be medicines if we're using them with the right set and setting and with an intention to heal, and hopefully maybe with guidance that we have a facilitator or someone that has more experience to help guide us and show us the way. Because these are very big experiences, they can break people, right? And even if they don't break it, maybe if they're healing you, but you kind of want to be held in them. You want to make sure they're supported. People do die in these experiences in the wrong context when they're not looked after. They may choke on their vomit. They may go off into the woods. They may do something to themselves when the ego's offline. So I like to say there's elements with, like, you know, working with plant and earth medicines. There's elements of therapy where people can be healing from their issues. And sometimes that's talk therapy, of engaging with a facilitator in the experience. Sometimes there's elements of shamanism where there's energetic work being done. There's releases that are happening. With 5-MeO specifically, I say that it's more like a rebirth, and that the facilitator is kind of more like a midwife or a doula. That you know, and in that context, you really want to be held, and you want to be loved, and you want to be supported. You know, so it's not just these substances; it's the context they're done in. It's the reason we're doing them, and the right kind of coaching and approach to it. And then it's that long tail of integration of like, well, who do we become when we've healed from our traumas? And then should we keep engaging with these substances? At the moment, 95% of all the psychedelic discussions happening in the world are about trauma, PTSD, and how do people make money off these things and do their own courses. That's great because a lot of people are traumatized and do need healing. But in the 60s, when we also had trauma, all through history we've had trauma, it wasn't about this. It was kind of more about exploration. There's a famous psychedelic philosopher, raconteur, Terence McKenna. He has a great phrase that says, "You are an explorer," and you are exploring these dimensions of being, and they are consensual, and they do exist independent of you. These aren't hallucinations. These are places you can go to, and you can return to them. And there's been a few different fringe experiments, mainly in the kind of drug communities. There's Arrowwood, one of the big kind of drug sites supporting psychonauts. There's been DMT Nexus, and over time, some of these people, there's a few current studies being done on the medical level where they're going beyond the medical model. In the UK and also in Texas, they're working on long-term DMT and NDMT immersion, where they've worked with Andrew Gallimore and Rick Strassman. Rick Strassman did the famous
I heard about
NNDMT
it.
tests in the 90s. Well, with that, Andrew Gallimore, they developed a protocol for an intravenous drip for working the right, body weight and the right amounts of NNDMT in a drip in the arm. So you're getting fed DMT constantly to stay in the zone for up to an hour. And the point of that wasn't to heal trauma. The point of that was to engage with the beings that you meet on the other side and the places and geographies that show themselves, and for multiple people to kind of triangulate and go, "Oh my God, you saw the three-headed snake woman who offered you this bejeweled thing." Like, yeah, I saw that too. These are independent kind of beings, and these are bookmarks that we can go, okay, this space exists. This space exists, and that multiple people are reporting it. That it's a geography, right? It's not just a hallucination. And so I really believe that this is the next step, and it's the original step of psychedelics, and that the communities that work with things like ayahuasca, all through the Pan Amazon Basin, we've kind of got a skewed idea of ayahuasca because it's come via Westerners in search of healing and in search of visions. But for many of the indigenous tribes, they drank ayahuasca as ayahuasca without the DMT, or the shaman would drink the ayahuasca on behalf of the patient and the patient wouldn't drink. Or essentially, the curandero, the shaman's activating their energetic field, they're looking in, and they're using that activation of the medicine to look in energetically, to traverse into those inner dimensions, to work out what needs to be fixed. They're kind of engaging with inner space. And inner space is a geography that exists in these hyperdimensional spaces which these medicines can reveal. And so these are technologies, right? And we shouldn't be ignoring them, and we shouldn't be reducing them down to a replacement for antidepressants, and to say, all right, you take this substance and then you're going to feel better, and then you can go back to work and you can be a drone operator and kill someone in Iraq or Afghanistan. It's like, I don't know, that's kind of what the Pentagon wants from, veterans really need healing. And a lot of the push for the reclamation of psychedelics into the medical fold is coming from the Pentagon and coming from organizations like MAPS and working with veterans who really do need healing. I'm not saying that they're not deserving of that at all. They've got some real big, obviously, traumas there. I think something like every 20 seconds a veteran is dying, something like that, every 19 seconds. But what I'm getting at is the powers that be that have controlled the reality and own the operating system of culture and civilization that is on the way down and declining, they're still wanting to use these substances just to patch things up. When I'm saying these substances are doorways to the infinite, to our infinite potential that, cultures that have been here before modern culture have accessed, have utilized, and there's a whole lot of prehistory that is kind of coming to light now that we believe there were other golden age civilizations. I know this sounds really out there. The more you're on this path, the more out there reality is going to get, because reality is out there, right? But what I'm getting at is these substances reveal the divine within, and they also reveal an interdimensional reality which we are part of. And I think that we used to have engagement with in prehistory, but have been hidden from us and have been locked down. And so we're kind of coming full circle now, where beyond the medical model of psychedelics, we're coming back to being explorers of the last great frontier, which is consciousness itself.
Consciousness itself. Yeah, that's beautifully magically put. Thank you so much. You mentioned Andrew Gilmore. He is on our list of guests we would love to record a podcast with. I love his work. And what you have mentioned regarding the DMT, it's a proof that, like, if two people see it, right, that it's not happening in our head, that it's happening
Did
outside,
you
that
see
the
that headline?
signal.
It was just last week in the news. It was like, I think it was from an older study, maybe a decade old, but they were saying, oh, researchers have discovered that in dreaming, and I think it was lucid dreaming and how they get to be able to do that, one person was able to transmit a code word to the other person in their dreams and to be monitored somehow by scientists that then were like double blind peer review study. I'm like, it's getting crazy. I mean, consciousness is getting crazy, even without psychedelics, right? Everything's kind of opening up and we're realizing, oh, we can
Yeah.
really do a lot more stuff than we were led to believe.
Is it amazing? And I'm really happy that the mainstream is trying to talk more and more about it more openly, uh, with more courage.
The game is the game, and the game is to awaken, right? To who and what you are, to your own divine nature on earth. More and more, I'm leaning towards what Elon Musk calls the simulation, the simulation theory, whether we're in samsara, we're in something. But they kind of say that
Mhm.
the something isn't as solid as it seems, and it needs an observer, and that the rendering of the universe kind of happens only when people are looking in that direction. And so I don't know all this, but I don't ever know who or what I really am. But I hope that these times that we're in and the emergency that we're in and the extreme events that we're living through, we're in the shadow of we're in World War III now, and it's a war of the people. It's an information war, a cyberspace war, a culture war, this war of polarities of languaging. But we're very imminently either about to have a nuclear war, a martial law, or a civil war, it seems like, all around the world. And that dovetails into the world ages and where we're at and why these things are happening. It's because our culture's not happening in a linear, one, two, three kind of thing. It's happening within this ecosystem, which is itself changing because it's cyclic. And we're in these world ages, which other indigenous cultures have said. These world ages happen, one world age ends, another begins. It's cyclic. But during these times, great transformation happens. We had yet again this year, just a few weeks ago, these beautiful red sky aurora displays all across the planet. Really beautiful. What they point to
Yep.
is that the magnetic field is weakening all across the planet as it's meant to in this cyclic time, and it's letting more of the mass coronal solar flare ejections happening from the sun and the solar sunspot maximum, which is in its normal 11-year cycle, cycles within cycles. But what one people won't put the dots together, and people in charge won't want you to really think about this, but it's like all of the preconditions of the planetary boundaries and the ecosystem have been overshot, and the magnetic fields, everything's coming to this crux very imminently, where nothing is going to remain the same, and we can't control this. And this is what I mean about it all comes back to consciousness and the ego. We can't control what's happening, and the great egoic kind of the ego wants to. The one that goes, all right, so this thing's happening. So we're going to build some underground bunkers and we're going to go hide under there, whatever. Meanwhile, other people are like, okay, we're going to ascend or whatever, whatever, whatever. But in the game of consciousness itself, we're in the final phase, and how you play the game is the game. And it's like, well, what are we going to do here? And I'm not saying just go take psychedelics and all will be great. I'm saying that it's kind of like the pressure of carbon or coal being condensed down into diamond over a very long period of time of incredible pressure. There is a natural process at work, which is consciousness, through the stress and the pressure of these times to make diamonds of us all. I really believe that. But it's like, are we going to break through or open, right? And so I don't think it's just easy listening and cruising along to the event horizon of the eschaton and the apocalypse here. I think that we're really knee deep in these very climactic times, which is like a game, and it's like a drama unfolding that we can contribute to. But the more we think we can stop it or change it or have an outcome that our ego wants to happen, the more we're not really getting what's really happening. we can only control ourselves and we can only evolve ourselves. And they say everyone has Buddha nature within you. And so if one Buddha is created from the pressure of these times, maybe that's what it's all about. I don't know. Maybe the whole reality grid changes. I don't necessarily have a happy message here. I'm saying let's continue to nurture each other as a community, to support each other, to do what feels right in our hearts, right? And to not maybe judge and blame, but let's be aware of the times we're in and the pressures, that these are evolutionary triggers to evolve, right? And that we have 5-MeO within us. We have God consciousness within us. The only thing between us and the divine is this. And this ego that will rage to try to control the outcome of these coming times. I'm like, let it. Don't attach to it. Like, go within and kind of activate or galactivate as best you can. And let's let that part of us, which is not the ego striving for survival, let's let the divine unconditional love part of us, let's let that intelligence guide us and groom us and show us where we're going and where we need to be. You know what they say, the great saying was that the Lakota Indians is like these times are moving very fast now, and it's like a river running. And if you look around and see who's in the river with you, they're your people, right? It's like, don't try to go against the current. Let it carry you. Trust the flow. Trust you'll go where you need to be, but know where your water is, where your food is, where your land is, who your people are, and let yourself be carried by that current, because we give ourselves over. We trust that whatever this is that we're in, it's here for us to learn and to grow, and that something in this process is not just a mystery, but it's a divine mystery that we're part of and that we're coming to fruition from these energies and these times.
Yeah, these are very important words and very beautiful message. So, what do you think we can do individually and collectively to change that?
I have done some lectures and some essays and some thinking around this that you can check out on my website, rakrazam.com. And I think there's quite a few things we can do, but I don't see us having the momentum or the chutzpah to kind of do it. And so number one, what I would say with medicine people, with psychedelic people is go the heroic journey. Go do it with intention. The difference we said as well between a drug and a medicine is intention. The difference between just a random psychonautical experience on a psychedelic and maybe a growth journey is the container that we create. So, we have an intention going in. We have a safe, sound, and sacred container to do the work. That intention may be personal healing, or it might be knowledge and wisdom, or it's like, how can I help? Or what am I? Or what are you? What am I in? This quest for knowledge, this quest for answers. And again, they're kind of egoic questions, but we're trying to get beyond the ego, but the ego is the one asking the questions. So it's tricky, right? But
Yeah, it's very tricky.
what I would say on the exterior is, I just wrote this article, this essay that's on my website called "We Go Together," and it's looking at the collectivism of medicine, psychedelic work of all through history, from indigenous tribes all the way through to the 1960s and Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters and the acid test, to these stories of tribes of people in Peru or South America doing ayahuasca collectively together, people tripping together, right? And so there seems to be a power in the collective that it gets beyond the individual egoic me-ness if we do these things together. So often if you've been in maybe an ayahuasca ceremony and it's in dark and you're all in there together and you're going through your personal journey and your personal healing and all that stuff, but you're connected to everyone. You can feel everyone. You can feel the slightest little whisper or this cough, or you can feel their energy. Like we're healing together, and there's something more beautiful doing it collectively, I think. And that's just when we're focusing on healing. So if we were to focus on intention and to go, all right, this is how magic is done. And magic is real. Magic is just another word, right? What did Arthur C. Clarke say? Any sufficient technology which is advanced enough is indistinguishable from magic. What we're saying is, again, coming back to at the start, consciousness is broadcast. Your ego is an app filtering the infinite consciousness into this like navigable story of who you are. But the ego is also growing and evolving and adapting, and who you are and your understanding of that will change as you go through these experiences. When we plug in collectively and do it together, we have an ability. It's almost like those, those lightning balls where you do and you go and you go, zzz, and then like one
Yeah,
stream, you
yeah.
get all the
This
streams and you
little,
bring them all together and it gets stronger, like the bandwidth gets bigger. I've seen this. I've done work collectively with people where if you hold a group intention, maybe it's to pray for peace, maybe it's to pray for a peace fire in Palestine, right? Or something like that. And they used to do this in the old days in the party circuit in the rave days and the trance music global scene, where they would do every year they would do a trance music festival that would pray to free Tibet, and that would be the intention. And so those people would go in and they'd be in an altered state collectively, and they would be holding the intention to free Tibet, free Tibet. Obviously, it didn't really work, but the idea of a collective intention that we hold when we're in an altered state together that's stronger than the individual egoic overriding it. The thing with magic is your intention can be manifest, but generally what happens is our egos get in the way. There's many different kind of magical pathways and precepts, but one of them is to write out your statement of intention, right? Is to like, it is my intention that there will be a ceasefire in Palestine, right? In 2024, you've got to be very specific, right? And then you can knock out the repeating letters or the thing. You can make it into a glyph, a little symbol sigil, but you hold the intention either as a phrase or as a symbol in an altered state, and then you fire it off into the universe. You let it go. And then when you let it go, your ego is not trying to make it happen. We can make things happen, right? It's like the old saying about manifestation. It's like you want a red sports car. It's like, okay, you want a red sports car. So you want to manifest it. So you can work for a year, you can save up your money, you can buy a red sports car, right? And that's magic. That's manifestation. You made it work. Or you can go, okay, I want a red sports car. I want it to be like this model, I want this. And you really want it, you fire it out into the universe, you let go of your attachment of thinking you know how it needs to happen. And then before you know it, your mother bought you a lottery ticket and then you got a red sports car. I mean, that's how magic happens. It does happen.
yep.
And there's also the counterbalances. We can't prove it because it hasn't happened to me. It's never works. But I'm saying the ego is what gets in the way. When we work collectively with a single intention, there's not one ego to get in the way. It's like the group intention kind of overrides it. So I believe there's powerful magic that can happen in a group container, in a safe, sound, and sacred way with an intention. You can go to your ayahuasca ceremony or your 5-MeO, your psilocybin, your Iboga ceremony. You can go with your own personal healing, but maybe like talk to everyone and hold a group intention and see if that group intention comes to fruition. It has more chance as a group. And imagine it, if we were all going in, as a group onto the astral to look at all the energetics, to think it all through, to look what has to change. I think it's incredibly powerful. I think it's almost like, Navy SEAL Team 6 going in for an extraction. It's like we're going into the infinite. We have this intention collectively, and we're bringing out the goods. And I don't think we've done this collectively before. I mean, indigenous cultures have. There's these legends that Terence McKenna has this, report of these Native American, South American Indians, and they're working with ayahuasca, and they're all on ayahuasca together, and they're singing this purple viscous superfluid through, and they're sculpting it with sound, but they're doing this collective activity, this magic together.
Collectively.
And so I really think that for me, I would love to dedicate, ceremony space to a collective intention and to work with people that maybe they've worked on their traumas, maybe they're ready, but maybe they want to do something like psychedelic activists going into the imaginal realms and the higher dimensional vibrational realms with a cohesive intention to seed it and to work on it. I think this can be done. Consciousness is up for grabs. I don't think we've explored this enough. So beyond the medical model, beyond the personal healing model, I think we can come together as collectives and we can do magic together. And I think that's when you work on the interior levels, the outside world follows suit. That's what happens. Is we've got to almost stop trying to, from an ego, trying to change the world and control the world, because someone else's ego is just going to oppose it, right? All the time, all the polarity in the world we're seeing. Let's go in and let's go in deep collectively with an intention for whatever we want to manifest in the world that can manifest together.
Thank you. I love the energy with which you communicate this beautiful message. I'm a huge fan of Terence McKenna, and I spend with him like hundreds of hours with his talks, and that's also why we started this project, this creation, this mission, Beyond the Courage, to spread the word and invite amazing, beautiful guests like yourself. So, what do you think it's like in the deepest core of your heart right now? What is the most important intention right now for humanity, for human consciousness? You mentioned love. The love is absolutely fundamental.
Well, I think it's kind of that. I mean, it's semantics, and we're going to quibble over. I mean, it's not anything physical on the outside. I mean, again, for all of humanity, and half of humanity is kind of warring with the other half of humanity, there's this division. And so we're not in
Mm-hmm.
unity, and we're not in unity consciousness. Our true nature is unity and is oneness, but we're in this division and dissension and dissonance where it's like one half of the body is fighting the other half of the body. So we can't really progress in any meaningful way until we have this unity. And to be in union together means that we are compatible. I mean, it's challenging. I mean, I hear myself and I'm thinking, well, what am I actually saying here? Am I saying we want, groupthink? We want uni thought. We want what Orwell was scared was going to be this kind of totalitarian, way of thinking, which didn't allow for individuality. I'm not saying that, but it's kind of like that, but it's like it's hard because we're in this ego sense trying to get beyond the ego, and we can see the divisions of the ego, and
Mm-hmm.
yet this togetherness seems to be the only way forward. But to get to a togetherness, we need a consensus, and to get a consensus, we really need to be of the same mind. It comes back to this consciousness. So, or even better, to not be in the mind, to be in the heart. And I think this is at the
Mm-hmm.
root of it all. When I first went down to the Amazon in 2006 to explore the archetype of the shaman in the Western understanding of what that means, and to work with ayahuasca, and that became the book Ira Awakenings, which then became the documentary film, which then led on to the TV show Shamans of the Global Village, which is kind of parlayed into all of these discussions and all of the work that I do. But originally, there was this understanding that the Keros people in Peru, they have quite a few legends and quite a few kind of warnings for us. They say that this is the time of Pachacuti, or the time when the world turns upside down, and we're feeling it everywhere. The Mayans had the 26,000 year grand cycle come to a close in 2012, and we're now in this new phase, and it seems like all the old phase is kind of dying off. But there's cycles within cycles. Anyway, the Keros said that there's this idea that what they call the eagle and the condor, and these are metaphors to describe not just South America and North America, but to describe the mind and the heart. And so everything we've been discussing, we're trying to say, how do we get beyond the ego? And we're trying to say love is what it's really about. These sound really flaky. They sound really kind of just like homogenized, psychedelic, greeting card kind of like memes. Until you feel deeply what love really is, you're not getting it. And we've all felt love. We've all felt what it means to be loved by our mother and father and our parents, and to love someone else. And we feel in a way that it's not thinking, it's not the ego, it's not intellect, it's something stronger than that. The ego and the intellect it's kind of like a navigating system, it's a GPS. But the GPS doesn't tell you why you want to go to the destination, right? What's it about? It's like when you get there, it is all about love. But the word doesn't do justice to the intensity of the vibration of what unconditional love really is. It's the divine. And so I think more and more we're coming out of our heads and into our hearts. And that is the unification of the eagle and the condor, the mind and the heart. It's not just that the ego, we need the ego, but it needs to know who the boss is, because the ego doesn't know what to do. Without knowing what to put in the GPS, there's no point knowing where you're going, right? And so the heart is how you navigate in the shamanic realms. The heart is home, right? The heart is what it's all
Mm-hmm.
about. And that vibration of love in the world is God, is the divine in us and working through us. So I think more and more we need to come into our heart space and to unify that with our head space, to be unified spiritual warriors, to be able to rise to the challenge of these times. And it's very hard, and it's getting harder in the world with everything that's happening, not to be triggered, not to react, and not to get this ego baitedness to know that you're right or they're right or wrong and right. It's polarity.
Mm.
And we're coming into this time of unity, whether we like it or not. And that means coming into the heart in a very visceral way. And this can be entrained. There's organizations like the Heart Math Institute, which do a lot of neurofeedback and of ways that you can actually work with your parasympathetic nervous system to connect to someone else and feel when you're in cohesion and unity, and to practice growing that field of being. Like, these aren't just empty words and empty ideas that don't have frameworks. There is so much, definable science and support out there for ways that we could start to work individually and collectively to clear our energetic field, to clear our traumas, to quieten the ego, to amplify our heart spaces, to entrain each other back to our true nature. And I think that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There is so many people out there globally who would love to get into this psychedelic world. What would be your message to someone who never ever experienced those molecules, those plants? There's so many people, at some point afraid, or they don't know if it's the good idea. I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are the people who not necessarily are already psychonauts. What would we could communicate holistically to that group of
Well,
people?
the great bard Terence McKenna basically said the psychedelic experience is your birthright. And it's like
Hmm.
imagining going to the grave, never having had a sexual experience. That you have these capacities within you, unless they're turned on,
Yeah.
you don't know they're there, right? Like before puberty, the child has this innate capacity, but it comes online at a certain time. And it's the same with the psychedelics. These are just words. All psychedelics do is modulate ego consciousness, essentially. We could shorthand and say that. And the ego is the filter between you and the divine and the infinite. And there is um, an infinite expanse of existence on the inner dimensions. It's like NASA for inner space. It's like before we knew the world was whatever and there was outer space, and now we know and we've got telescopes. We kind of have the technology to look inwards now into inner space vibrationally. And it's like it's
Hmm.
infinite. And so I would say that we've said the preface and the kind of warning thing, these things aren't for everyone. But the thing is, consciousness is for everyone. Everyone has consciousness, right? And everyone has an ego and a filter. And everyone has the spark of the divine within them, I believe. And as we said at the start, the intelligence of what we're not in just like a box here. We're in Mother Earth. We're in Gaia. She's alive. She's intelligent. She's nurturing us. Just like the human
Nurturing. Yeah.
body, such an intricate cohesion of all these kind of systems at place to make life possible. And it's grooming and supporting us to be here now in this moment, right? For this opportunity to be alive. And we need to do something with this life. We need to explore our true potential and who we are. We need to unify the hearts and minds, and we need to kind of go inwards. And it's like consciousness is there, and the times are here, and the catalysts are happening, which will instigate this exploration, whether you're taking a psychedelic or you're being psychedelic. And I think that's really the next step. And I can't necessarily prove this, but I could send you some links. There was a New Scientist article probably about a decade ago looking at magnetic field phenomena, which we discussed a bit, and looking at what's happening with the sunspot activity and what happens with consciousness on Earth, and people that are kind of predisposed to altered states, whether you would call them psychotic or, neuro on the spectrum, neurofluid maybe. But consciousness itself is believed to be a magnetic field phenomena tied to the magnetic field of the Earth, right? And that consciousness is kind of always changing. and that we have this level of what we call egoic consciousness that we think is what it's all about. My deep understanding, and I've talked about this, and you can look at my website, is that what we're experiencing right here, right now, is an ego which is traumatized, and that we've inherited this over the last 12,000 years from the survivors of what went down 12,800 years ago in the lower Dryas extinction event, where the majority of life on Earth and species almost all died. And this is a cyclic event which happens when the magnetic fields drop and incoming solar energy comes in, and the indigenous cultures and previous cultures left us mythology maps and more physical kind of maps of, hey, this thing happens and there were giant floods all across the earth and the earth was in upheaval. And that's the physicality. But the energy coming in and what happens with consciousness itself, I feel like we've been traumatized. I call it, species PTSD. And that the ego, which is just a functioning, it's a GPS system to pass and to understand past, present, future, left, right, up, down, good, bad, to keep you navigating. That's kind of come to the fore from our species trauma. And we've inherited it epigenetically and kind of, energetically. And this seems normal now. But this is a traumatized consciousness which doesn't remember who and what it really is, or its place in the web of life. It's not normal. And so I think that as we're starting to heal this traumatized consciousness, which is our template, we're expanding and opening up to the great mystery, which is all around us, within and without, and that we don't need the external psychedelics. Here's the funny thing. We contain in our beings both NN-dimethyltryptamine and 5-methoxy-NN-dimethyltryptamine. We contain some of the most powerful psychedelics in nature in our beings. They're kept at bay by the MAO inhibiting chemicals in the gut, but they flare up at peak experiences, according to Rick Strassman as a theory, like birth, death, near death, or mystical experiences. And before the 20th century, when we started to interrupt our natural cycles of day and night and light with artificial lighting and degraded diets and things like that, people were having mystical experiences spontaneously without an external catalyst, without taking something. We are psychedelic, and we're relearning our operating system. And the external psychedelics are just training wheels. They're just training wheels. We have the capability to meditate, to go within, to modulate consciousness, to lower the egoic gate, and to connect to all these realms. And that's what these exterior substances are entraining us to remember that we are the medicine, that we can do this too. And I think if we do it together collectively, it kind of comes into a cohesive gestalt, which is greater than the sum of the parts and can help speed things up. So I would say just explore yourself to your fullest in whatever time we have left, because time is short and we get in our little comfort zones. But I would say seize the day and seize the love. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful words. Really amazing. At the end, I would like to ask you, Rak, how do you understand time and death? Are these just processes we go through as a consciousness? Have you ever been in your peak experiences outside of time?
Pretty much always. I mean, this is the thing. Mm-hmm. The ego is designed for the terrestrial level down here on planet Earth. You wake up, oh my God, here I am back in the simulation. I start having thoughts. What day is it? What time is it? These are the first things we ask. It's like we spatio GPS temporal locate. Yeah. Who am I? What am I doing? What time is it? And then we start to play the game of whatever we remember. We'll go through the things. Most of the psychedelic experiences are time dilating, in the sense of the more you slow down and the more you go inwards, the more 1 second can be an eternity. What was the William Blake quote? Like eternity in the palm of a grain of sand in the palm of your hand. I mean, as we slow down, we realize that you can have 8 hours of experience in a minute, right?
A minute, yeah.
By modulating your consciousness, however you do that. Now, that word, these are great words, but these are fundamental to the human experience. We must all chuck love in. Love, death, time, right? The big three, maybe. But time's kind of an illusion. This is what kind of a lot of modern quantum physics kind of says. Time's a kind of a repercussion of the ego filtering itself through space-time. Is that you can't have time without space modulating, and it's like I'm not going to get into it, but somehow it's a filtering mechanism. Time is a perception of the filtering of infinity, you could say. So once on N,N-dimethyltryptamine, I saw this twice on DMT, and once spontaneously in a lucid dream in Peru, in one of the chapters of my Aya book, where I would see all of space-time as a construct, almost like I was saying before, as an audio wave file. Because I was outside of it, looking at it, I could see the beginning and the end, left to right, and it was like a wave file. It's like an audio wave file with the peaks and the troughs. And I could see I was getting these visualizations and other iterations of this transmission, where I could see characters and beings, like when I look at it from above, and like the whole of the world would develop and it would flow over time. Like cartoons, when you see every 1/20th, you'd see every frame moving, and it builds up into a moving image. And if you slow down enough, you can deconstruct space-time, and then you can also kind of realize that it's an illusion, right? We're going through this samsara, this construct of ordering events, but it's all one big thing happening all at once. So my intuition was, it's an organism. Space-time is an organism created from the divine as it condenses down and creates the matter world, and it's connected energetically back into the frequency of eternity, where it's just radiating its beingness. But when you get down here, because it's all one construct, the future is happening right now, and so is the past. And they're affecting each other. And I do believe that quantum physics also agrees with this. I call it chronal nutrients, that events or things from the future can be directly going back and affecting the past. And then it actually overwrites itself like magnetic tape, taping over one song over the next. That, okay, this all happens, creation all happens, and then this thing happens that overwrites that, and then the past has changed. But you don't know it because you're here in this moment. It's all a simulation.
Yeah.
So that's just time. So if we talk about death, this is a great one because it's a stupid word. It's a stupid word. What we really mean is dying. Because if you haven't crossed over, process, you don't know what death is, right? Death is this word to describe not this, not being here in the ego mind, which thinks it's separate and individual, having this illusion of the samsara of sequential space-time, which is also an illusion. It's the comfort zone down here in the gravity well, right? But for instance, on 5-MeO, which does seem to me to be analogous to the dying experience, to the egolessness experience that they've done. There's a few reports out, peer-reviewed studies looking at near-death experiences and 5-MeO and comparing them with written oral reports, and they're identical. Essentially, people that have a near-death experience and cross over and come back describe exactly what people on 5-MeO describe, because they're just two different ways to access the same space, which is you and within you. Mm-hmm. And so when people have crossed over and come back, there is a continuity of consciousness, because remember, consciousness is broadcast, right? And when you cross over, what you're doing is you're going from this 3-4 dimensional plane, this vibrational realm, and you're going up the vibrations back to the originating home dimension of the divine, which is eternal and radiatingness, and your energetic signatures matching it, and you exist there. And I've had experiences, rarely, but there's thresholds to source consciousness, and on the shallower end, where the ego can still be present, I have experienced contact with beings in that space. Not anything bad. In fact, probably more angelic, like beings made of light, which were separate from the space itself, but made of the space itself, right? And what I took from that is this understanding, as some of the indigenous tribes say, like the Sequoia in Ecuador, who work with Wambisa, they work with Yahe, which is their name for ayahuasca, but the Wambisa has 5-MeO in the admixture plan instead of chacruna or NN-DMT. And so they're very used to this space of crossing over and going to this space on the other side of the ego, which is this infinite space. And they say that the knowledge of the Yahe was given to them by the star people, or those who live in the light. And these experiences kind of made me realize, you can read The Toad of Dawn by Dr. Octavio Redig, I wrote the introduction to that. It's actually on my website, just the introduction. But it was a very unusual archetypal first experience with the toad medicine. I'd had an experience 8 years before with synthetic 5-MeO, which was in the Higher Awakenings book and film. But on this experience, I basically experienced these ancient, withered curanderos, these medicine people made of light, singing me back from the void of light, of the white light. And they were in the light with me. And anyway, my feeling is there's an event horizon within Source, within which we can ascend energetically and as consciousness live in these ecologies of higher vibration. And I think this is the point, that the whole physical world is like a womb. It's like a birthing chamber for species which rise and fall over cyclic time. We're getting very esoteric and very deep, but it's hard to bring in all of this thing. There is
No, I love that.
there's something called
Go
the
ahead,
galactic
proceed.
superwave, which is not me, that's astrophysics, it's their term for it. It emanates from the center of the galaxy, it's galaxies wide. It's an energetic kind of plasma field which is emanated from the galaxy, and most likely all galaxies. And as it ripples through all galaxies, it sets off the space dust and the micronovas of the suns, and it instigates these cyclic transformations on the Earth and other planets it encounters. And so the organism of the physicality of the universe is not static. It's always changing, and it's instigating us to grow. And it seems to be we have a very short amount of time within which civilizations form in the target window between ice ages, when we have the right conditions to flourish, like a microorganism flourishing in the the biome of our own stomach, and then the conditions change again. And so in that target window, I like to call it the orgasm of the species. We learn about who and what we are. We learn about our energetic beings. We learn how to drop the ego. We learn how to collectivize and go in together. And we learn how to go into these dimensions of being, which all these indigenous cultures who have used psychedelics say exist, right? And it's like the Buddhists, they believe that the point of being here now is to cultivate your consciousness to the point where you learn how to remain conscious when you cross over. And when we're working with these substances, especially 5, we're continually crossing over and coming back, crossing over and coming back. So what is death? It's just a word which isn't very good, right? Because what we're saying is there's a geography on the other side of the ego, which is a dimensional space within which there's this infinite loving presence, and there's an ecology of beings which have learnt to live in that space. And that this world, this 3-4 dimensions, is just the beginning. And that I think that we're learning to become multidimensional to then graduate to the higher dimensions where all the action really is. And perhaps the species which have transcended before or have gone through this process and succeeded may have graduated to ecologies of being. I know how out there that sounds, right? But it's like, it seems like if you really look into the process that we're in on the Earth, if you look into everything that's happening, if you look into all the potentials that are being revealed, that this is what we're meant to do, right? We're meant to go in together and kind of ascend. And it's like, I don't know, that doesn't seem like that bad to me. It seems like the next step in our human evolution.
I love that you going that like extremely esoteric here, superbly resonating with me, and I think that's what humanity needs to hear right now. That we have these tools. That I love that idea that death is a stupid word, and then of course we can exist on the other side. It's very beautiful message. I think it can build a lot of hope within human hearts, because
it's even not just
most of
the
humanity,
end, it's the beginning, right? And
it's
we
the
just have such
beginning
a
of.
charge around. Obviously, we all fear death, and that's why they say gives life meaning, right? But again, what is life? Like this is the test. This is the school of life. This is the game. This is the thing which is here to instruct us to look deep within ourselves to discover that we're God, right? And then we use this activated energy to then go next level of the game.
Yeah. Let's not be afraid of that we are gods, and I got one more question pop up to my mind that there is a new molecule right now available, like, I don't know, probably 2 years, which is called 5-MeO malt. And a lot of people call it the female version of it, which is way more gentle and it takes way more time. Like the session is not 10 minutes, it's 2 hours. Do you have some experiences and some
I
views
don't.
about this molecule?
I have
Or
vaguely
you know?
heard of 5-MeO malt, but I have not. Nothing's coming to mind that I can tell you. You're
Mhm.
not thinking of psilomethoxin, which is only about 2 years old, which is the
No,
magic mushrooms being fed synthetic 5-MeO in the substrate as they grow, and it's a longer oral experience of 5-MeO.
no, I heard about it from Leo Gora. He's got a huge channel, actualize.org, and
Mm.
he called it the female version of 5-MeO malt. It takes 2.5 hours, and you can work with like laser beams of your consciousness with some aspect of your life, and within 20 minutes you can resolve some issue which may take you organically like 10 years.
I will have to try that. I've got nothing against that. What I would say though, that there's a danger of commodifying. Oh, here's the newest psychedelic. It's like here's this other great thing. And what's happened? Oh, the ego's found a way to work with it in a laser sharp way, which could be very
Yeah,
conducive, could be great. But the danger, all I'll say, is that the ego finds ways to not die, right? And it often finds these substances are inviting it into an ego death, which I don't like because we just agree that it doesn't happen.
yeah.
But it will be so tricky, even on these ego dissolving experiences, to hold on to a thought or to be working on the trauma story or working on it's like, okay, now I'm doing the work. But it depends on the substance. But with 5-MeOs in general, it's about fully letting go of the ego, and healing may result from that as you let the cork on the bottle, the ego go. All the stuff you're holding on to can clean out. The ego is like, no, I have to be present for that. I have to make sense of that. Well, that could be true, but just be careful because the ego may be finding a way to weaponize ego dissolvingness to remain present.
I love your point. I never thought about it this way. Even when I had a podcast with Martin Ball, he said the same thing, that 5-MeO DMT has enough energy. That wave of energy is so huge that ego is not able to process it, right? And with 5-MeO malt, I never thought about it. I love your point that 5-MeO malt could be a creation of the ego to not to
It's
dissolve,
no
to
creation.
die.
It's just that the ego can dilute or water down. It's the same with vape pens and 5-MeO and lower dose.
Mm.
There's a lot of territory there. There's a lot of things it can be very useful for, but in general, there's kind of a movement to dilute the ego dissolving potentials, and they're just avoiding the central thrust and purpose of 5-MeO in general. It's not to say there can't be great gains made, but it's like it's not the general intention of the medicine in general.
Mm. I'm very tempted to ask you one more question because you mentioned ego so many times in this conversation. Uh, do you have any ideas how we can work with the ego to create less chaos?
I
You
would say
mentioned that we
this. I
may
would
not
say this.
survive.
Don't ever say ego death because your ego hears you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and it's not true. It adds to the anxiety. It's like the ego needs to be wooed and nurtured like a baby because it is.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it's a very fundamental and raw kind of thing that reacts. It's like, oh my god, I take things personally. Oh my god, it's about me, and it's like, oh my god, I'm threatened. Oh my god, did they say it? Like it's really raw. It's really young. I mean, the intellect may be whatever age you are, but I think the ego is like a baby. It's just
Mm-hmm.
reacting. It's reacting on this raw level that doesn't know how to not react because that's all it does. It reacts. That's what it does. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I'm saying is nurture it, love it, make it feel safe. Like, regulate your parasympathetic nervous system because we're all kind of wired and tired. And it's like, the ego is not something to get rid of. The ego is something to embrace, that you're holding it and it feels so safe like a baby in your hands that it can let go of trying to control you. right? And when the ego is not controlling you, when something big is holding it, which is what the divine shows it, if it lets it, then it can relax. But if it can't relax, it's going to fight whatever experience you're on the whole way, in subtle ways or in more overt ways. And so what we're really learning to do, and this is why I think the group work can really help, is it's we're tribal beings. We used to trip tribally on the savannas of Africa and the psilocybin kind of mushroom trances. It's like we're used to being in altered states together, but supporting us to not hold this tension of being separate. So I'll just say in general, love the ego in a way which woos it into this safe space so it doesn't feel separate anymore. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's what unity consciousness is. And then when you're not in the ego, then you can be in the heart, because they need to work together. And we don't want to get rid of the ego. We want to bring it into unity with the heart. So the heart's driving it and give it the instructions of where to go and what to do. Without it, the heart's having a good time, feeling good, but it's not going anywhere. It's not doing anything. With the ego and the heart unified, then you've got the full package.
Yeah, those are beautiful words. So the bottom line is to be in our hearts as often as possible. At the end, I would like to ask you, Rak, where our viewers and listeners can find you. What are your plans for the near future? What are your dreams for next year?
The best way to find me is just my website, rakrazam.com. So I've got probably hundreds of hours of interviews like this up there now, usually with some transcripts. There's some free ebooks.
Wow,
most of my
amazing.
stuff is free. I do have a few paid products. I have my book, Higher Awakenings. There's a second book, the Ayahuasca Sessions, interviews with curanderos and Western shamans. There's a paid ebook on the website you can access with a lot of interviews with 5-MeO facilitators, practitioners, and a lot of the culture around it, which is probably, and it's definitely kind of more the non-medical model, more the exploratory model, but it's definitely probably one of the world's premier kind of containers for information about 5-MeO in that ebook. And then I have a lot of free lectures and a lot of good content up there as well. You can subscribe to my newsletter there and get some free information every week in your inbox as well. I'm hoping next year to kind of rebrand. It's challenging because I'm trying to respond to the times we're in, and it's, as I said, it's very polarity driven, and no matter what you say, someone's going to hate you these days. And I'm trying to find what is not just the right message for these times, but where am I at on my path? What do I believe is really happening? And this conversation's been really good to help kind of focus that down into something. But I think that's what I want to do, is like create a container and a platform to engage with people and work with people into this collective approach to consciousness. And to, my model is something like the Million Meditation March, where they've done all these experiments with people meditating all at the same time, and they use these random generating machines to see if the focused meditation is affecting them, and it seems like they're getting corroboration that it does. And I just believe that in this collectivism, there's a lot of juice that we can help support ourselves and help change the world by changing ourselves. So subscribe to my newsletter and check out my website. And I would love to work with you, the people who are watching this in 2025.
We will post all the links in the description. Are you also facilitating in Mexico, where the 5-MeO DMT is legal?
Yeah, I have been doing some 5-MeO retreats in Mexico. There was the bridgingheaven.com retreats working with low dose 5-MeO and a Vipassana style meditation retreat. That will be happening again next year under the Tandava Retreats brand and banner with Joel Briere and Eugene Allende, who are two of the co-facilitators. And yeah, just keep in touch. And if I do any more global retreats working with medicines, I'm kind of hankering to go back to Peru and do ayahuasca again, maybe next year. It's been a while. And so I usually I did for 7 years, I took groups down there to work with ayahuasca, and Percy Garcia Lozano, my shaman down there, who's really reputable and trustworthy. But yeah, I would love to work with more of the community and do some retreats in countries where this is legal. Let's do it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. It was another Beyond the podcast. My name is Robert Canis. Our guest was today an amazing human being, Rak Razam, who's got such a beautiful and brave life. I really admire your work. You got such a huge knowledge and spreading this with so much courage. Deeply appreciated here. We will post all the links to the description. And yeah, that was Celebrating Life with Rak Razam. Thank you.
Thank you for the celebration, Robert. That's been very helpful. Let's be beautiful out there.
Thank you.